Living at home with my folks till I was 25 wasn't something I planned out like some strategy. It just felt right, you know. We were tight, like really tight. Some folks get antsy to bolt the moment they hit 18, but not me. My parents' place was more than just a house. It was home in the realest sense. I didn't see much point in changing that. Then life threw a curveball. Losing them both to the pandemic felt like someone ripped the ground right out from under me. Suddenly I was staring at this gaping hole in my life, trying to figure out what comes next. They left me enough money to coast for a while, but the thought of just living off their hard work felt off. It didn't sit right with me. So I made up my mind to pull myself together. It wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. The whole idea of diving into the job market, of being truly on my own for the first time, was daunting. But the alternative, living in a bubble, pretending I didn't need to grow up, that wasn't an option anymore. Finding a job wasn't a walk in the park either. I ended up landing a gig as a manager at this trading company. The work was a whole new world for me, but I dug my heels in, determined to make it work. Got to start somewhere, I told myself over and over. I remember running into an old friend from school, Jake, while I was out grabbing lunch one day. He spotted me first. "Hey, isn't that the homebird Emily, still living in your folks' nest?" he teased, a smirk playing on his lips. His words stung more than I wanted to admit. I squared my shoulders, facing him head on. "Actually, Jake, I'm managing on my own now. Got a job and everything," I shot back, the words laced with a mix of pride and defiance. "Oh, look at you, all grown up and independent." Never thought I'd see the day, he laughed, but there was no real warmth in it. "Yeah, well, people change, things happen. You learn to stand on your own 2 feet, I replied, my tone sharper than I intended. The conversation felt like walking through a minefield, each word carefully chosen but loaded. Jake shrugged, the conversation clearly not going the way he expected. "Fair enough, good for you, Emily, really." We parted ways shortly after the encounter, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. It was a reminder of how far I'd come, sure, but also of how much further I had to go. That night, as I sat alone in the quiet of the house that used to be filled with my parents' laughter, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was fear, yeah, but also a budding sense of determination. I was on a path they'd never get to see, forging a new life from the remnants of the old. The chill in the air wasn't just from the December cold, it was my first holiday season without my folks. The Christmas sale crowd was a mix of frantic and festive, a sharp contrast to my own numb wandering. That's when I bumped into him, literally. Ouch, watch it. I started more out of surprise than pain. Sorry, my fault entirely," he replied, catching a box of Christmas ornaments before it hit the ground. "This crowd is wild, huh?" He was about my age, with a look of earnest concern that quickly changed to a sheepish grin. "I'm Alex," he said, extending a hand, not holding runaway Christmas decor. "Emily," I responded, taking his hand briefly. "Yeah, it's madness. Christmas shopping always turns into a contact sport." Alex laughed, and it was an easy, genuine sound. "You're not wrong, I'm just trying to find something for my mom. She loves these handmade ornaments, but I'm clueless." Looking at the box he almost dropped, I picked one up. "These are nice. Look, this one's got intricate designs. Bet she'd love it." We moved through the stalls together, talking about everything and nothing. Alex was easy to talk to, a breath of fresh air in the midst of holiday chaos. "So Emily, what brings you here? Looking for anything in particular?" he asked as we paused by a stall selling handmade scarves. "Just trying to feel, I don't know, festive, I guess. My parents, well, it's just me now. Holidays feel different," I confessed, surprised at my own honesty. Alex's expression softened. I get that. Holidays, they can be tough. But hey, we find new ways to make them ours, right? Yeah, right, I agreed, finding comfort in his understanding. We ended up spending the afternoon together, finding gifts and sharing stories as the sun began to set, casting long shadows between the stalls. Hey Emily, would you maybe want to grab a coffee as a thank you for helping me survive this shopping ordeal? And well, for the company? He suggested, hopeful but clearly trying to play it cool. I thought about it. My instinct was to retreat, to go back to my quiet, solitary world. But something about Alex, his easy kindness and his understanding, made me want to say yes. Sure, Alex, I'd like that. Coffee sounds perfect, I replied, feeling a spark of something warm in the cold evening air as we walked toward the nearest cafe. I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would mark the beginning of something new. Not just surviving, but maybe starting to live again. A couple of months down the line, Alex decided it was high time I met his folks. I was a bundle of nerves, hoping to make a good impression. Their welcome was polite, but I could feel the chill through their smiles. We were barely through the door when the questioning started. It was like stepping into the ring, except I wasn't prepared for this kind of bout. So dear, Alex tells us she lost your parents recently. That must have been tough, his mom began, her tone soft but probing. Yeah, it was a rough patch, still is sometimes, I admitted, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. The conversation felt too personal, too soon. And what about work? Alex mentioned you're in trading, how's that treating you? His dad chimed in, his curiosity not quite matching the warmth supposed to accompany such questions. It's going good, keeps me on my toes, I responded, trying to keep the nerves out of my voice. Must be quite the lucrative field, eh? What kind of figures are we talking about? His mom's question hit me like a cold splash, too forward, too soon. I glanced at Alex, hoping he'd throw me a lifeline. The look on my face must have said it all because he quickly jumped in. Mom, Dad, come on, let's not grill her about money, that's not important, Alex said, his tone firm yet respectful. I could have hugged him right then. Despite his intervention, the evening carried an undercurrent of unease. After we left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't measured up to their expectations. In the car, the silence was heavy until I couldn't take it anymore. Alex, do you think your parents didn't like me? The words tumbled out, laced with worry. Alex took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Hey, don't worry about it. They're just protective, you know, give it some time. They'll see how amazing you are. Just like I do. His words were meant to comfort, and a part of me wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered, a shadow on what should have been a straightforward step forward in our relationship. Settling into married life at my place was like a dream for the first 6 months. Me and Alice, we were in our little bubble of happiness. Sure, his mom, Mrs. Thompson, didn't exactly warm up to me. Always poking at my cooking, my cleaning, even how I dressed. But since they lived a good drive away, those jabs were few and far between. We managed. Then one evening, Alex came home looking like he'd lost his best friend. Babe, I've got to head out of town for work, 2 whole months, he said, barely meeting my eyes. My heart sank. 2 months? That's ages. What about us? I asked, my voice trembling with worry. I know. It's the last thing I want. But I don't have a choice. And there's more. My mom's in the hospital, heart problems. Hearing that about Mrs. Thompson, despite our rocky relationship, I couldn't help but feel worried. Oh Alex, I'm so sorry. Is she okay? They're not sure yet. She might need surgery, he replied, his voice cracking a bit. Without a second thought, I said, I'll look after her while you're gone. She'll need someone, right? Alex looked at me, a mix of surprise and gratitude in his eyes. You'd do that, after everything? I nodded. Of course, she's your mom. The next day, I took a day off and headed to his parents' place. Mrs. Thompson was already home from the clinic, looking frail but stubborn as ever. Emily, what are you doing here? She asked, eyeing me like I might steal the silver. I'm here to help out. Alex is worried about you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She huffed, settling back into her chair. Well, I don't need babysitting, especially not by you. I bit back a sharper reply. I know you don't, but I'm here to help with cooking, cleaning, whatever you need. Mrs. Thompson squinted at me as if trying to figure out my angle. Fine, but I like my meals on time and my house spotless. And don't think you can dress like a slob here. I forced a smile. Understood. Those weeks turned into a trial by fire. I cooked, cleaned, and did my best to keep things running smoothly, all under Mrs. Thompson's critical eye. Every dish I made was either too salty or too bland. Every room I cleaned missed some speck of dust only she could see. One evening, as I was scrubbing the kitchen counter for what felt like the 10th time, she walked in, watching me like a hawk. You missed a spot, she said, pointing to a corner so far back it would require me to grow an extra arm to reach it without moving everything off the counter. Mrs. Thompson, I'm doing the best I can, I said, my patience wearing thin. She snorted. Clearly, your best isn't good enough. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Alex was counting on me, and I wasn't about to let him down, no matter how much his mother pushed my buttons. Is there anything else you need before I go to bed? I asked, keeping my tone polite. Just make sure you're up early to start breakfast, and try not to burn the eggs this time, she replied, turning on her heel and leaving me to my thoughts. Life at my in-laws became more of a boot camp than a recovery ward pretty fast. Every day, it was like waking up to a new list of demands from my mother-in-law. And every evening, I juggled my job and her endless requests that just piled up one on top of the other. Can you fetch me the remote? It's just there on the coffee table, Mrs. Thompson would say, pointing at an object mere inches from her hand. The first few times, I didn't mind, but then it became a routine, her asking for things she clearly could get herself. Cooking dinner turned into a tactical mission, trying to remember all of her dietary whims. I only eat organic greens, you know, and the chicken needs to be cooked just so, she'd instruct, her voice carrying that tone that said any deviation would be unacceptable. Evenings, the only time I could catch my breath, were hijacked by the blaring TV. Mr. Thompson had a thing for action movies, the louder the better. There I was, exhausted, trying to find some peace but instead getting a front row seat to explosions and car chases. You know, Emily, ever since you married my son, my health has just gone downhill, Mrs. Thompson threw at me one evening out of nowhere. Her words stung, especially since I was bending over backward, trying to make her life easier. I tried to keep my cool, but it was getting tougher. I'm really trying my best here, Mrs. Thompson. I don't see how my being with your son is causing your health issues, I said. Her lips pursed into a thin line, clearly displeased. Well, if you can't see it, I'm not sure how much help you are here, she replied. I was at my wit's end, dreaming of my own bed, my own kitchen, my sanctuary. But then Alex called. Babe, I'm so sorry, but I'm stuck here for another 2 months. The project's just not wrapping up as we expected. Hearing his voice tired and strained, I wanted to be strong, to not add to his stress. It's okay, Alex, we'll manage somehow, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Are you sure Mom's not giving you a hard time, is she?" he asked, worry creeping into his voice. After hanging up, I realized this was my battle to fight, at least for now. Mrs. Thompson and her demands, the never-ending noise, the blame, it was all on me to bear. But I couldn't help but wonder how much longer could I keep this up. The strain at home hit a peak when Mrs. Thompson had another heart scare and ended up needing surgery. It was serious enough that I called Alex in a panic, and he rushed back home. Seeing him was a relief, but it was short-lived because work pulled him away again. After the surgery, things at home didn't get any easier. Mrs. Thompson came back needing more care than before. It was like looking after a child. She wanted help with everything. Eating, dressing, you name it. And Mr. Thompson, he was no help at all. Instead of appreciating the effort, he complained, "You're always out. I end up cooking for both of us. What are we, chopped liver?" Then Mrs. Thompson started with her threats, saying she'd tell Alex I was neglecting her, hinting he should leave me. "He'll listen to his mother, you'll see," she'd hiss, as if I wasn't already stretched to my limit. My patience was wearing thin, like an old pair of jeans about to tear at the seams. Mrs. Thompson's demands grew by the day, each one more unreasonable than the last. It felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, waiting for the whistle to blow. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Mrs. Thompson in the living room, a scowl set deep on her face. "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you to start dinner," she snapped as soon as I walked through the door. "I had to stay late at work, Mrs. Thompson. I'm sorry. I'll start on dinner right away," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my frustration. "Make sure it's edible this time. Last night's dinner was a disaster," she retorted, turning her attention back to the TV, which was, as usual, blaring at an ear-splitting volume. I wanted to scream, to let out all the frustration and exhaustion I'd been bottling up inside. Instead, I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I began to prepare dinner. 2 weeks passed like that, and my obnoxious ward should have fully recovered by now. However, Mrs. Thompson remained weak. One day, I got off work early. I was tiptoeing into the house, hoping for a quiet afternoon, but what I found was anything but. There was my mother-in-law, lively as can be, chattering away on the phone like she was at some high tea party. "Yeah, I've got her wrapped around my finger. Just a little act here and there, and she jumps, does everything for me, even the little things. I can do it myself," she boasted to her friend, her laughter echoing off the walls. I stood there, frozen, key still in hand. The realization hit me like a truck. All this time, her needing help, her pain. A good chunk of it was just an act, a manipulative play to have me wait on her hand and foot. The anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. I stepped into the room unable to hold back. "Really now, is that how it is? Putting on a show so I do more for you?" I confronted her, my voice hard, the words tumbling out. She turned, the phone still clutched to her ear, her face a mix of shock and guilt. For a moment, she looked like she was caught in the headlights. Then, quick as a flash, her demeanor changed. "Oh, you're home, look at the time," she said into the phone, brushing off our confrontation, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. This was a game, Cher. I realized then, that no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Not because I wasn't doing it right, but because the goalposts were always moving. I finally said, the disappointment heavy in my voice. "I've been breaking my back for you, and this is how you repay me, by lying, by manipulating." Her response was cold, calculated. "I'm just making sure you're doing your part. After all, you married into this family. It's your duty." I didn't want to fight, but I couldn't let this go. I've had it, Mrs. Thompson. I'm leaving this house, I said, my resolve hardening. Before I knew it, she was on her feet, fury in her steps as she snatched my phone from the kitchen counter. She stormed outside, and I followed, only to watch in disbelief as she threw it under the car, smashing it. "Let's see you call for help now," she sneered, her actions betraying her desperation. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, not just for the phone, but for the sheer breakdown of respect. I started gathering my things, determined to leave, but she wasn't done. She followed, throwing my clothes and personal items out after me, shouting insults that stung deeper than the cold air. "You're nothing, you don't deserve to be part of this family." I was outside, picking up my things and trying to hold back tears when Alex arrived. The sight of his car was both a relief and a harbinger of the confrontation to come. "What's going on here?" Alex demanded, his eyes darting between his mother standing at the doorway and me, a mess on the driveway. "She's crazy, Alex. She's been lying about how sick she is, and now this." I gestured to the scattered belongings and my destroyed phone. His gaze shifted to his mother, searching for a denial that didn't come. "Mom, is this true?" Mrs. Thompson's facade crumbled, but her defiance didn't. "She was never good enough for you, never good enough for our family." Walking into his parents' house, Alex was a storm dressed in human skin. His face was set, his jaw tight, ready to confront the hurricane his parents had brewed. "I can't believe what I've been hearing and seeing. How could you?" Alex started, his voice heavy with disappointment and anger. Mrs. Thompson shot back. "Oh, now you're going to believe her over your own mother. She's turned you against us, filled your head with lies." "That's enough, Mom." Alex's voice cut through her accusations like a knife. "I've seen the videos, I've heard the recordings. I've heard enough of your words about her. There's no denying what you've done." The color drained from Mrs. Thompson's face as realization sank in. Her bravado faltered, her usual sharp tongue suddenly heavy in her mouth. "And you?" Alex turned to his father. "You just stood by. You let this happen." Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably, the guilt evident in his avoidance to meet his son's gaze. Alex continued, his disappointment unwavering. "Did you know that she sold her parents' house to pay for your wife's operation, because the insurance wouldn't cover it all? We were planning to build a new house. A place where we could all live together, but not anymore." The room went silent, the weight of Alex's words pressing down on everyone. Mrs. Thompson, tears streaming down her face, reached out. "Please. I didn't know. I can change. We can forget all this happened." But Alex was resolute. "It's too late for that. You've shown us who you really are. We're done here." "I'm done." Mr. Thompson, realizing the magnitude of their loss, turned to his wife with a look of betrayal. "You foolish woman, you've ruined everything." As Alex and I walked out to the car, the finality of the situation settled in. We were leaving behind more than just a house. We were severing ties with a part of our lives that had turned toxic. Sitting in the car, about to start a new chapter, Alex took my hand. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, but we're going to start fresh, just the two of us." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. "Together," I affirmed, squeezing his hand back. We drove off, leaving behind the chaos, ready to build a new life on our terms, grounded in truth and respect, away from the shadows of manipulation and deceit. A month flew by, and finally, our new house was ready. A real beauty, if I do say so myself. Alex and I put our hearts into making it a home, picking out every piece with care, making sure it all felt like us. We hadn't spoken to his folks since that day, heard through the grapevine that his dad up and left, found someone new, leaving Mrs. Thompson to fend for herself in some small apartment. She tried reaching out, wanted to patch things up, but for us, that ship had sailed. Some wounds are too deep for sorry to heal. One evening, as we settled into our new living room surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, Alex looked over at me with a smile that always made my heart skip. "So babe, how do you feel about starting a family here?" he asked, his voice casual but eyes filled with hope. I paused, the question hanging in the air like a promise. "A baby here with you, that sounds like the dream." Alex reached for my hand, his touch grounding. "I think we're ready to make new memories, good ones, in this place we built together." I nodded, the future suddenly blooming before us, filled with possibilities. "It'll be amazing, our own little family, yeah?" Alex agreed, a softness in his voice. "Our own fresh start, away from all the drama, just us and a new beginning." As we sat there planning for a future filled with laughter and love, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace despite the rocky road that led us here. We were building something beautiful on our own terms.
"All right, everyone's presentations are done," Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.